We have dog. We also have dinosaurs. Yeah. As you can tell, this is going to be my review of the Pixar movie, The Good Dinosaur, which came out in 2015. It came out the same year as Inside Out, one of the very few times where Pixar has two movies that come out during the same calendar year. Doesn't happen too often. Disney doesn't do it too often as well, but this is one of the rare times where they did. I have Rainy here for at least part of the video. We'll see if he sticks around for the whole thing. I also pulled out some of my dinosaur stuffed animals. Yes, the brown one is Littlefoot, even though he is not related to Disney. And then we have Jurassic Park in the background because why not? Jurassic Park is coming out pretty soon. And then we have my two other dinosaur shirt with my herbivores and my carnivores shirt over here. Can't see them that well. I've used them in other videos. Okay. You can still see the dog. Note, I'm actually recording this on Father's Day. I'm not ignoring my dad. I already spent the morning with him and Saturday night with my dad, and we went and had brunch with my grandpa today. So I got plenty of Father's Day stuff. I made my dad dinner last night. I made him like homemade chicken strips and potato chips and everything, and they turned out really well. And we watched The Good Dinosaur, which is actually kind of a rather apt Father's Day movie, in the fact that it does deal very much with the relationship between a father and his son, between, you know, the parent dinosaur and the baby dinosaur, or the younger dinosaur. The setup of the movie is we have this alternate timeline where instead of, 65 million years ago or whatever number it was, in our timeline, of course, 65 some million years ago was when an asteroid hit the Earth, and we believe that is the main cause for the extinction of the dinosaurs. It may have triggered several other things that also resulted in compounding into the extinction of the dinosaurs, or the extinction of the majority of them, and then the smaller ones possibly survived because we know that those eventually evolved into modern day birds and such. But the alternate timeline for this is that instead of the asteroid hitting Earth, it actually just whizzes right past it, like just misses it by like a hair's breadth, or whatever you want to call it, the space definition of a hair's breadth. And the dinosaurs just kind of see that, and they go back to being dinosaurs. And then we cut to a million years later, and we are introduced to the fact that these dinosaurs have now evolved. They've become a bit more human-like. Not that they look more human-like, but that they've evolved a bit more. Like their brains have grown in size, and they've kind of developed more logic and reasoning and everything like that. And we see that they've the two that we are introduced to first are these two apatosauruses, Henry and Ida. And they are these two giant apatosaurs, and they have this little farm, and we see them tilling the fields, clearing the fields, putting in, all the grooves in the fields and everything to plant the seeds. We see them actually planting the seeds. We see that they've built like a house. We see that they actually have like a fenced in area and everything like that. So we see that there is this amount of certain things that go into building a farm. And we see that they are waiting for their 3 eggs to hatch, and we see that their 3 eggs slowly start to hatch. The first one hatches. It is a little girl. She is named Libby, and she seems to be this little wily little, like, sneaking about and everything like that. And then we are introduced to Buck, who is the second born. And he seems to be much more headstrong and everything. Like, he picks up this stick that's somehow in like the house that they live in, and like starts whacking his dad with it and everything. And and then the 3rd egg hatches, which is the largest of the 3 eggs, and inside is actually the smallest of the little baby apatosaurus, and this one is Arlo. He is the runt. I will not hear, there was a fan theory that Arlo was actually supposed to be bigger, but he ended up hatching sooner than he was supposed to, so he was not as full grown as he was supposed to. Obviously, this is not the first movie related to dinosaurs that Pixar has done. There was Dinosaur way back, and I think it was 2000. 2001, 2002 range, which I reviewed in the Disney movies. And Disney has also dealt with dinosaurs in various other ways as well. There's a whole Fantasia sequence in the original Fantasia movie that is about, evolution and centers around dinosaurs at one point. So, Disney has done quite a bit when it comes to dinosaurs. And, what we see is, that they each get named, and as they grow up, we kind of see them get a little bit older, kind of turning into more, like, I guess, teenager-like-ish, and we still see Libby, she's very wily and, like, tricks, Buck into, like, doing her job for her, and, like, a bunch of other stuff like that. Buck is still very headstrong, very stubborn at times, but he does still care about his siblings and everything, but we see them fight. And then, of course, Arlo is still the runt, and Arlo is very much this very timid, very scared, very shy little thing. I mean, he's a dinosaur, so he's probably, larger than I am at this point in time, but he's still, like, very timid and scared of the world around him. We see him having to, his job is to mainly help take care of, like, their chickens, I guess, the dinosaur equivalent of a chicken, that they've, I guess, raised. I don't know what they do with the chickens. We know that they eat corn. We know that the dinosaurs themselves, like, eat corn, and that's, like, the main thing that they're growing, or, like, something very similar to corn. But then, like, they also feed that to the chickens, so it's like, but they're herbivores, so we know that they don't eat the chickens. So I don't know exactly what's going on with the chickens, but they have chickens. Don't know why. And Arlo is just, like, terrified of them, and, there's ones that just keep scaring him all over the place and everything, and he just, like, anytime that he gets scared, he ends up, like, causing problems. And I'm just gonna, like, tilt the screen so you can kind of see what Rainy looks like right now. We just got back from a walk and it's pretty hot outside, so he's just like, I am going to blah on the bed. Yes, you. I'm talking about you. And what ends up happening is their dad, Henry, ends up building this giant, corn silo. It's, like, all made out of stone and everything. And it's supposed to be where they're going to put all of their corn to hide it, or to store it and everything, and keep it away from the critters that keep getting into their food supply. Sound argument, sound logic. And he builds the silo, and there's, like, these, like, 5 extra large rocks that he uses. And he's like, each of us, as we go, we're going to put our marks on this, silo, to show that we've left our mark on the world. And, like, the wife, Ida puts hers on there, and then, Henry puts his mark on there. And then over time we see both Libby and Buck do it. Buck clears, like, one of their cornfields, and, like, he gets to put his mark on there. And then we see Libby is, like, she, like, digs all of the troughs. They dig with their heads, which is quite actually a good way of doing it. But, like, they put their head in the ground, like, they dig their way through it that way. And she does that. And then, for the field to get it ready for planting. And that's how she leaves her mark. And Arlo is, of course, he watches as his siblings are able to do this. And he tries to do what he can. He tries to stand up, to feed the chickens the way that he's supposed to. His brother ends up, like, tricking him and, like, embarrassing him and everything like that. And he gets in trouble for it. Buck gets in trouble, not Arlo. And what ends up happening is Arlo just is, like, very timid and scared still. And late one night, when the others are all asleep, Henry comes in and he, like, takes Arlo out into this field. And this is kind of, like, one of the big, pretty moments of the movie. And what happens, and I'm just gonna add this in here, I love the landscapes that they designed for this movie. So the landscapes here are, like, designed to be very similar to, like, the American West. So, like, the Rocky Mountains area and, like, other plains areas and different things like that. And it's gorgeous, and I loved how they designed this movie. It's just freeze framing, like, just a bunch of the landscapes in this movie. So it would be, like, an amazing picture to just have on your wall or something like that. It's like, they're beautiful. And what happens is, Henry takes Arlo into this little field, and he, like, a little bug lands on his nose, and he, like, reveals that it's it's a lightning bug. And he then, like, starts, gently moving his tail through the field, and it starts, like, making all the lightning bugs, like, come up and start glowing and fluttering around them and everything. And Arlo is just, like, amazed by this. And Henry says, and I think this is the quote that I have in the end of this, is, you have to see your way through the fear or through the darkness to get to the, the beauty or the light or the whatever on the other side. The actual quote is the end quote of the video. So I'm not expected to memorize it now. And what ends up happening is, Arlo is just very amazed by this. And, he's just like, he's ready to try to do what he can to leave his mark. And, Henry's, the silo keeps getting broken into, and he makes this like critter trap. It's, it's a trigger trap. It's, it's, I don't hunt, so I don't know the exact name for it, but it's, you put the net in the air above where you put the food, and then you wait until like the trap gets triggered, and then, you trap the critter, and then he tells Arlo that he's supposed to smash it with, this, blunt object. It's like it's a mallet that they have. It's a branch, that they use. And like, Arlo's supposed to then, smash the critter once they catch the critter. And like, that's Arlo's job. That's supposed to be what that's supposed to be his job. And then like, if he does this, and that'll let him be able to leave his mark. And, Arlo is very determined to do this because he wants to make his father proud of him. He wants to leave his mark. He wants to prove that he can. And, while he's like guarding the silo, the trap goes off, and he goes and he investigates it. And inside, he thinks it's a weird monster. It's, it's a critter, as they keep referring to it. And of course, this is a human boy. Small, I don't remember if we ever get like an age range on what the kid is supposed to be, and later on the kid gets called Spot, so I'm just going to call him Spot as opposed to the critter or the kid all the time, so he's Spot. And Arlo ends up, he can't bring himself to kill it, and he ends up like freeing it. It runs off after it scares him again. And then like Henry is like mad at this point in time. Papa is mad at this point in time, and him and Arlo like kind of follow the critter out, and like there's this storm rolling in. And while they're, going their way through, and like, they're getting further and further away from the farm, probably further from the farm than Arlo has ever been. And he's like, as long as you can find the river, you can find your way back home, find your way back to Clawtooth Mountain, which are these three pillared mountain that they have, 3-peak mountain that they live near. And what happens is, Arlo, while they're like trying to find the critter, Arlo ends up getting hurt. And, Henry like kind of snaps out of his, like, it's not a blind rage or anything like that, but it snaps out of his like being angry at Arlo. And like they turn around to start going back. But unfortunately, a landslide happens, a mudslide, very large, rapid, massive wave starts coming towards them. And Henry manages to get Arlo to safety, but unfortunately the water rushes through and washes Henry away, and he is presumed to be dead, or I don't know. We never get like a thing of like, oh, they found his body and he is dead or something like that, but he is dead. And they make a grave for him. Whether or not they buried him, we don't know, but they made a grave for him. And now it's, just Arlo, his mom, and his siblings that are now taking care of the farm. And it's, they're working on getting the crops in before the first snow. And what ends up happening is, their mother is kind of pushing herself a bit more than she probably should be. First of all, she's going through grief, of course. They're all going through grief because they lost their father and their husband and everything. And she is like the oldest, so she's the one that's supposed to be, keeping her children in line and taking care of and everything. So it's this thing of like, she's wearing herself thin. And what happens is, Arlo is trying to do as best as he can to try to help his mom and his siblings. And what ends up happening is Arlo ends up finding the critter again, finds Spot, and he ends up chasing Spot, and both of them end up getting knocked into like the rapids in the river near where they live. And they get washed down the river. I don't remember if we ever get like an exact distance, or if it's ever stated like somewhere else, not in the movie itself, but like somewhere else in like, I don't know, the production or whatever, where it's stated that like how far away he actually got washed away, but both him and Spot got washed away. And Arlo ends up getting hurt during this time frame, like one of his front legs gets hurt. And he wakes up and he finds that he's like just somewhere far away from wherever he's ever been, further away from the farm than he's ever gone, has no idea where he is. And he ends up seeing Spot, and via certain things, Arlo ends up trying to build himself some shelter, and it doesn't work very well, and he keeps kind of getting laughed at by the other animals. So it's like we do see other mammals in this, because we see like what are probably like, you know, prehistoric like squirrels and whatever else that we see, beavers, whatever else you want to go with that are just prehistoric, other prehistoric animals. And what happens is, now, yes, in regards to context, no, humans and dinosaurs, even if the dinosaurs had survived longer, I don't even think like proto-humans, like, you know, cavemen, Neanderthals, whatever, I don't think they would have like coincided, unless the dinosaurs made it a lot longer into the future in regards to how they would have evolved. But I guess, you know, via evolution timeline in this case, humans still evolved, but, you know. And what ends up happening is the critter, Spot, he gets named Spot later, tries to keep bringing Arlo something for him to eat. Because he's like somehow connected with Arlo. I don't know exactly. It's like, you know, Arlo spared his life before, but then he tried to chase him away and everything. So it's just like, don't know exactly what's going on there. But Spot has like somewhat, I'm not going to say imprinted, but he's like somewhat interested in Arlo, and he at least doesn't want Arlo to die. And he like, first he brings him like an iguana looking thing that's like, you know, like brings it to him, and it's like, it's not dead yet. So it's kind of like your cat bringing you like a half dead bird and expecting you to kill it and then like congratulate it because it brought you food, or like bringing you like a half dead mouse or something like that. Rainy has never brought me anything that was half dead, thankfully. I've had to take rabbits away from him if they come into the backyard, and he's tried to hurt them. And there's been raccoons in the backyard before, and a possum at one point. But he's never actually tried to bring me anything that was dead or almost dead, from what I can remember. I'm pretty sure I would remember that. But you know, he brings him like a iguana, and then like the iguana wakes up and runs off, and like Spot gives him this look like, well, why didn't you kill it and eat it? And then like he brings up like this giant bug, and then like brings it to him, and he's just like looking at him like, come on, you're supposed to eat it. You're supposed to kill it and then eat it, because that's what you're supposed to do. And he even like rips the head off the bug to try to get Arlo to eat it. And Arlo's like, ooh, no. And eventually Spot ends up bringing him, you know, like a bunch of berries, and like Arlo is able to eat those. Finally brings him something he can eat. And you know, Arlo, you know, he wants more of that food. And what happens is, you know, him and Spot end up going through, well, they end up climbing along like this cliff type thing, and then they end up getting, at one point, I love this, at one point, Spot ends up basically biting Arlo and tricking him into being like a bridge, which is just funny, because he like makes him fall and like uses Arlo as a bridge to get across to like where the berries are. And then they end up getting attacked by this, well, it's a proto snake. It's either a snake that's evolving into like a lizard, because it looks like it has like small legs, or it's a lizard that is eventually slowly evolving into a snake. One of the two, I don't know which. One of the two, but it's obviously a snake-like creature. And it tries to attack them, and Spot ends up defending Arlo. Spot defends Arlo from the snake and is able to get rid of it. And this is, you know, Arlo is kind of impressed by this. And Spot even does this whole thing where he just like, he gets rid of this thing and he's like growling at it, and then he goes, like, I did good type of thing. He's given me that look multiple times when he's like, okay, we give him cardboard boxes to shred. Especially very apt that you're here to help with this video, Rainy. And he's like, you is talk, I is just lay here. I am just puppy. And what happens is, Arlo and Spot they end up meeting this, he's called I'm probably going to mispronounce this and I apologize, a Strachiosaurus that is called forest woodbush. Don't ask me why. He is collectively referred to as the pet collector, and that's kind of what he's called. And he has, you know, he's very similar to like a Triceratops in the fact that he has like this giant crest on his head and a horn. Probably some relation to a Triceratops or that type of thing somewhere in the, you know, the genus or whatever. I don't remember the different levels for the animal kingdom tree and everything. Family, kingdom, phylum, I don't remember. Genus, species, I don't remember. But he sees him, like, he like shows that he has all of these other pets that are all like just all these different names that he's given them, you know, like all these random names, and like, and this is Dream Crusher. He prevents me from having unrealistic expectations. And then this is Debbie, who is just like a bird, and like she doesn't have a purpose, she's just there. And what ends up happening is he's like, you know, I will, you know, he tries to get Spot from Arlo, and there's this moment where it's just like they're both trying to like come up with like a name for Spot, and like the pet collector is giving these really weird names like killer, murderer, destroyer, whatever, and then Arlo is just using like much more like, you know, calm names and everything. I was like, whoever names him gets to keep him type of a thing. And he eventually goes, Spot, and Spot goes, huh? Like comes over to Arlo. He's like, you've named him, he is now yours. And then they keep traveling, and like we see like the two of them slowly bonding and everything. And I think it kind of gets to be like the next day or so. And what ends up happening is or that night, Spot and Arlo like stop to rest, and we find out like there's kind of like this moment of like communication, of connection between the two of them, where like Arlo starts talking about like his family, and he, you know, he puts like these different little sticks in the ground to represent, you know, him and his brother and his sister and his mom and his dad, and then he draws like a circle around them to show them that they're together, and you know that they're all together as like a family. And Spot like understands this, and he like picks up a little stick and he puts it in the ground, and he picks up like two bigger sticks and puts them in the ground together, and then like draws a circle around them, similar to just what Arlo just did. And Arlo kind of seems to say something along the lines of like, well, if you have a family, then why are you on your own, or something along those lines. And Spot like takes the two sticks that are supposed to represent his parents and like puts them down, and then like covers them with like the sand or the dirt or whatever that it is that they're by. And so it's just like to represent that they're dead, that both of his parents are dead. And Arlo understands that, and he like picks up the biggest stick that was, you know, that was supposed to represent his father, and he puts that down, and then he like covers that with dirt. To represent that, you know, so like Spot understands that, like that you know, Arlo's father died. And like, of course, Arlo is still, and I mean, there's no stated length for how long you have to grieve for someone, or how long you can grieve for someone, or how long you're required to grieve for someone. You can lose someone when you're a kid and still grieve the loss of that person, even when you're like a full-grown adult, or even when you're like in your 80s or 90s or whatever. You know, you still lost that person. That person still meant something to you, whether that was like a friend or a cousin or a parent or a sibling or some other family member or a teacher, or, you know, someone that at least had a huge impact on your life, or was at least extremely important in your life. And even, you know, even years down the line, you can still grieve and miss them and everything. That does not mean that you have to continuously grieve all the time, and it gets less and less. And I've talked about this before in other videos where I've talked about like where it deals with death at times. And you know, it's not, there's no like set amount of time that you have to grieve for someone. You can grieve, you may not grieve, you may grieve in your own way, and it all just depends. And Arlo is just like, you know, I miss my dad so much type of thing. And Spot comes over and kind of like curls up next to Arlo and like kind of like pats his leg, and it's just like, oh, they're bonding type of thing. And like the next day, while they're still traveling, there ends up being this huge storm that comes through and like ravages this area. And like Arlo is like just having these memories of what happened with his father, of like the storm that took his father from him. And he's just, you know, he's traumatized by it, and he ends up, you know, hiding out. And the next morning, after the storm has passed, they end up, Arlo, you know, he's physically fine, but he can't quite seem to figure out where Spot went. And what ends up happening is we're introduced to these groups of pterodactyls, and they're led by Thunderclap. And Thunderclap reveals that okay, so for all intents and purposes, these 4 or 5, whatever, pterodactyls basically have a cult where they worship the storm. They follow the storm. And they scavenge. They're carnivorous, of course, and they will scavenge small animals that have been trapped by the storm or hurt by the storm or whatever. Arlo is kind of too big for them to eat. Also, he's not hurt, so he has the ability to fight back. And it's, you know, they kind of talk about, like, as I said, they're basically in a cult where they, like, follow the storm. It's just like, I have seen the eye of the storm. And, like, okay, y'all are nuts. Just go away. They're crazy. And what ends up happening is they end up chasing Arlo and Spot. And basically end up chasing them right into these 2 Tyrannosaurus Rex siblings, Nash and Ramsey. And Nash and Ramsey, like, protect them from, like, protect Arlo and Spot from the pterodactyls and, like, send the pterodactyls off and everything. And, you know, Arlo is, of course, like, their Tyrannosaurus Rexes, admittedly, yes, Tyrannosaurus Rexes and Apatosaurus did not exist at the same time at all. And in timeline, like, the Apatosaurus was like 130 million years ago, and Tyrannosaurus Rexes were like 65 million years ago, or whatever that range was. They went over this in the bonus features of the movies. I don't know these numbers off the top of my head. As much as I love dinosaurs, I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. It's like, do I have an Apatosaurus on this thing? I might have an Apatosaurus on the shirt. I know there's a T-Rex on that one. That one might have an Apatosaurus on it somewhere. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But what ends up happening is, Ramsey and Nash are there. Like, they help Arlo. Like, Arlo is, of course, terrified of these T-Rexes because they're just like, oh my god, they're going to kill us and eat us. And I was just like, no, we're not going to hurt you. What are you? You know, are you okay and everything, little guy? And then we get introduced to their father, Butch. And it is revealed that these guys are kind of like, well, for all intents and purposes, they're the equivalency of, like, cowboys, of, like, cattle ranchers and everything. They're trying to, like, their herd got taken from them or is, like, wandered off, and now they need to go find their herd. And the herd of longhorns, the prehistoric longhorns. If anyone watched my video about the trip that I took to to Morrill Hall in Lincoln, part of the new exhibit is this giant life-size version of, like, a prehistoric version of, like, a buffalo, and it's huge. And I think that's what the longhorns are in this. What they're supposed to be referencing was that type of creature, that type of buffalo ancestor. And what happens is, Arlo is like, well, I need to get home and I need to find the river because he's lost the river. And it's just like, I need to get home. And they're like, well, we don't have time to, Butch is like, well, we don't have time to help you. We have to go get our cattle rustlers. And Butch is clearly based off of John Wayne. He is clearly based off of, like, that John Wayne cowboy type character, like, focuses on his work, on his job and everything like that very tough, like, cowboy type of thing. Ramsey and Nash are a little bit less of that, but Butch is definitely that type of character, is what he's supposed to be referencing there, which is perfectly accurate because one of the director has stated that, like, he loved growing up. He grew up in New York, and, like, his most, the best things that he saw about, like, for the West and everything like that were, like, the Western movies and everything like that he would see in theaters, and, of, like, John Wayne and, like, all those different movies and everything that he grew up watching, with, like, all these amazing, like, landscapes and of the West and of cowboys and cattle rustlers and everything like that. And Arlo explains it, well, my Spot, his pet to a degree, is like, well, he's really good at sniffing things out. So, if you have something that we can, that he can sniff, that'll lead, he can lead us to your longhorns. And Spot does end up, sniff them out, and, like, leads them to the longhorns, and it's just like, they were taken by cattle rustlers. And they use Arlo as bait by saying, okay, so here's what you do. You go to that, Butch like says something, and then like Arlo was like, I have no idea what you just said. And then I think it's Ramsey is the daughter, I think, and I think Nash is the brother, I think. I may have those two flipped around. I apologize. But what happens is Ramsey, or the daughter, translates. She's like, he wants you to go over onto that rock over there in the middle of this, and then scream, because that'll bring out bring out the wrestlers, and then we can attack them. And this happens. Arlo goes and he screams on the rock, and all these different velociraptors show up. And they're supposed to be like cattle wrestlers type of a thing, and one of them's led by like a velociraptor named Bubba, because what else would you name a velociraptor besides Bubba? I don't know, Blue comes to mind. And what happens is, the three T-Rexes fight against the velociraptors, and there's also like a stampede of the herd going on. And Arlo actually kind of ends up having to help them. He's like, trying to help, Ramsey and Nash and Butch and everything try to stop, defeat the raptors. And they do end up beating them and getting the raptors out of the way and everything. And they get the herd set. And, Butch and his kids thank Arlo. And like that night where they're all sitting around the campfire, and the brother, I cannot remember which one's which. I'm going to say Nash is the brother, and then like Ramsey is the sister. I'm just going to go with that. And if I'm wrong, I'll figure it out when I get to the cast listing. He uses a weird bug as a harmonica, which is just funny. And then like they're all sitting around the campfire, and then they're telling like their stories about like their scars, because like Arlo's got like some new scars on his legs and everything from like dealing with the velociraptors. And, it's just like, oh, you got some nice scars there on you. Those are going to go over real good. And, like, Nash has, like, scars on his feet. And, from, like, dealing with, I think they stated it's dealing with a Spinosaurus, or not a Spinosaurus, a Stegosaurus. One of the spikes on its tail with the club spike tail, one of those ones. That's how he got like a bunch of scars on his feet. And then like Ramsey, like her tail had gotten caught at some point, so she had like 127 hours there where she like chewed off the end of her own tail. And then like Butch has like this huge scar on his face. It looks like he got bit. And like he explains that he got bit by a crocodile, and he's like telling the story to Arlo, and he's just like, I got this, I went down to get a drink of water after, I hadn't had water for like however many days. And I ended up getting ambushed by these three crocs. I, took care of this one, took care of that one. And then the last one that had been bit me, I drowned it in my own blood type of thing. I'm like, are we sure John Wayne didn't reincarnate from you? Because if that was the case, if that's the case, then whatever John Wayne is in, like, the Pixar universe, he is now the reincarnation of this dinosaur. Because that is such a John Wayne thing. And what happens is, Arlo ends up going with them, and like they're like, well, we're heading toward a watering hole, and maybe from there you'll be able to find your way home, or find someone that can like help you find your way home. And he's like, okay. And like he rides with them, he runs with them as they're like herding the herd, and he gets, he's gaining a lot more confidence. Like he's, having to like forcefully help keep the herd moving and everything, keep it from turning off. And he's gaining a lot of confidence, as I said. And he, they get to the watering hole, to like the rest area or whatever. And like he sees like the Clawtooth Mountain in the distance, and he's just like, okay, I can get home from here. And like, and he's like says goodbye to like, Butch and his kids and everything. And, he's headed out. And then what ends up happening is, while they're traveling, once they've split off, there's like this really great scene where you see like Arlo and Spot just like bonding more and everything, like, just having fun and everything. Like they go swimming and, just like a whole bunch of this other stuff. And at one point, Spot had actually started kind of teaching Arlo how to howl, which actually becomes a story point, because when they were sitting on the beach or so, when they were like talking about like, they lost their families and everything, Spot like started to howl at the end of it when they were done, and like Arlo howled with him to a degree too. And while they're like working their way back toward Clawtooth Mountain, they hear this other howl, and like Spot kind of responds, and then out kind of in the distance shows to be a caveman, and he like kind of gets closer to them, and like Spot kind of like goes to investigate him. Like he kind of like comes, I don't remember if he gets really close and like Spot like tries to investigate him or whatever, but Arlo just like picks up Spot and puts him back on his back, and like they keep going. And he's talking about, when we get home, it's going to be fine. You can, you'll sleep with me, and like we'll have plenty of food. Like you can run around as much as you want and everything. Like you'll help take care of the farm, type of a thing. And then another storm rolls in, and Thunderclap and the rest of the pterodactyls show up. And there's actually this great way that they do it, because like the clouds are like just thick above Arlo, and each of the pterodactyls, like we see them, it's basically like you're watching like sharks in the water, like circling like a kill or circling their prey. And we see like and I don't remember if it's supposed to be like their wingtips or something like that, but it's just like coming through the clouds, like you would see like a shark's fin in the water, and doing that. And they end up, they chase Arlo, and they get Arlo, Spot separated from each other. And what ends up happening is, they've pulled Spot away from Arlo, and like Arlo kind of falls down this cliff where he ends up getting like wrapped up in all of these vines, and he's trapped in the vines. And he knows he has to go after Spot and try to save Spot and everything. And what happens is, when he's wrapped up in the vines and everything, his father shows up. And he helps get Arlo out of the vines and everything. And it's like Arlo's like so happy to see him, and like Henry starts walking away and like kind of pulling Arlo with him. And Arlo, they're going the opposite way of home. They're not going toward home. And Arlo, kind of stops, and he's like trying to shout at his father. It was like, I have to help Spot. He's my friend. He's, I know that I was blaming him for what happened to you, and I'm sorry because it wasn't his fault. I wouldn't put the blame on Arlo either for what happened to his dad. It was nature. It was an accident. It wasn't like Arlo intended for his father to get hurt, and it's not like Spot intended for Henry to get hurt. So that's different. But what happens is Arlo looks down at the ground, and he sees that he is leaving footprints in the ground. And we see his dad walking, and his dad is not leaving any footprints in the ground. There's nothing there that would indicate that his father had even walked there. And Arlo is starting to realize that this is not actually his father. This is a vision of his father. And earlier, when Arlo had talked to his father before Henry had died, Arlo had said, I'm not like you. And he'd said, you're me and more. And Arlo is revealed that he is determined to go back and to save Spot. He's like, I can't leave him here. He's my friend. I can't let him die. And, his father's kind of illusion, hallucination, spirit, Mufasa, Simba, Mufasa in the sky moment, whatever you want to refer to it as, happens. And he's just like, I kind of the I'm proud of you type of thing. I was like, you're me and more type of thing. Isn't like, you're me and you're better than me. You will be better than I ever was type of thing is what that's trying to say. Or at least that's how I interpret it. And they, Arlo, it starts raining again, and Henry kind of gets washed away. The image of him gets washed away, and Arlo wakes up, and he's still trapped in the vines, and he pulls himself free of the vines. And as he's running to go and try to figure out where Spot went, where the pterodactyls took Spot, he keeps howling, and eventually he does get a response from Spot. He follows the howl, and he finds Spot trapped in this old tree trunk with the pterodactyls all around it trying to get to him. How he ended up in the tree trunk, I don't know, because they had him, so I don't know exactly what happened with that. But Arlo shows up, and he, headbutts two of them and whacks another one away, and then two of them try to drag him away, and he, uses what he's learned and knocks them off, knocks them with a tree, and ends up, Spot is the one that actually takes down, I think, Thunderclap. He rips a hole in Thunderclap's wing by like biting it and then ripping, and then like Thunderclap like tries flying off, and then Arlo just like throws like a really big branch at him, and he just like really good hit because like Thunderclap's flying away, and like Arlo like throws the branch and like hits him, and he like lands into the water. So like all the pterodactyls are like either knocked into the river, and it's like this rushing river that's slowly growing. And Arlo realizes what's happening, and he looks off in the distance, or he hears like that same sound of like this rushing rapid of a wave coming. And he jumps to where Spot is. Spot's still kind of trapped in the tree trunk, and we see Arlo just jump and jump in front of the wave, in front of the tree trunk, and like as they both get washed away in the rapids. And like we see Arlo like kind of he's like swimming in the rapids, trying to get to Spot, like getting closer and closer as like the water is like moving them further and further down the river, and there's a waterfall coming up, so there's like this big drop that's going to happen. And Arlo manages to get to Spot and get him, and like they do go over the waterfall. And like it's like the moments of tension of like, oh my god, are they okay? Did they drown? And like he pops his head out of the water, and he's got Spot, and he's like gets to shore, and there's it's like, okay, so Arlo's safe. Like, what about Spot? And we see Spot, or we see Arlo like cradling Spot as best he can with the fact that he doesn't have hands, and like Spot like wakes up and he starts coughing, and like so he's alive. And Arlo is just like so happy that Spot's alive, and like just kind of holds him as best as an Apatosaurus can that doesn't have opposable thumbs or hands, kind of holds him. And then we cut to kind of the next day, and or somewhere after that, the next day or so, or a little bit later that day, after like the storm has passed. And what happens is Arlo and Spot are now almost at home, and like they get to the top of one of the cliffs areas, and they're able to see down to the farm. And like so Arlo can see that the farm's still there and everything, so he's just like, he's almost home. And then they hear this howling again, and they turn and they see the caveman has returned. Like, he followed them, but it's not just him, it's also these other, it's like the caveman's like wife, and then like their kids, like their two kids that seem to be around the same age as Spot. And like they kind of like come down, and like Spot goes and like kind of like communicates with them, like kind of like meets them, like it's like seems to be very happy to meet them and everything like that. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, so either this is just like another random family of cavemen, which is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly fine with that plot hole, and like they just Spot would be compatible to go and live with them, or is this like the family he thought he lost? And it's like it being this new family makes much more sense. And what ends up happening is Spot seems like really happy with them. He comes back and he like sits back down on Arlo's back, like okay, I'm ready to go back, I'm ready to go to the farm now. And Arlo just takes this deep breath, and he like pushes. Come here, you're gonna be an allegory, okay? So like Spot's sitting here, Arlo turns, looks at him, and like pushes him down his back onto the ground. And has this moment where he's like, he's saying goodbye to Spot. He's like, you have to stay here with them. This is a much better spot for you to be. No pun intended. This is a much better place for you to be with them, because not like the you'll be with your own kind thing, but it's like they can take care of you a lot better than I can. It is a little bit of, I guess, you'll be with your own kind thing, but he pushes Spot over to them, and he like draws like this big circle around them. And Spot understands that now this is where I want you to be. And Spot goes over, and him and Arlo, he like hugs Arlo's head, because that's how small he is compared to Arlo. He like hugs Arlo's head, and like they're both crying and everything. And I skipped over this moment earlier in the movie. I was not intending to, but there's a moment earlier in the movie where like Spot and Arlo end up in like this field again. in like a different field, and Spot or Arlo ends up showing Spot all of the fireflies and everything, like seeing them, you know, fly around and everything. And I just love those images that they have of like Spot and Arlo with like all the fireflies all around them and everything, like just how beautiful it is with like the two of them playing in the butterflies and or playing in the fireflies and everything. Admittedly, I kept saying butterflies, fireflies, like fire butterflies. Butterflies are not on fire, but glow like fireflies would be awesome. Like if their wings glow, that would be awesome. Side note, but so like Arlo says goodbye to Spot, and he like leaves him with like the cave family, and we see them go off, and like Spot looks like he's gonna be happy, and like Spot starts, you know, they have Spot like walking upright type of a thing, and like, you know, they head off, and then Arlo makes his way back to the farm, and like his mom is the first one that sees him, and like Arlo is now walking with so much more confidence, so much more you know, pride in himself and the things that he's accomplished, the fact that he's made it back home after going on this journey. And he, you know, he walks in, and like his mom kind of like at a distance, she like sees him, and for like a second she thinks she sees his father, and then she realizes that it's Arlo, and she like runs over, and like, you know, the moment of like the two of them running to each other, and like, you know, the Apatosaurus version of hugging with like your necks going around each other, and like his brother and sister, you know, Buck and Libby come over, and like they start hugging him too and everything. And, you know, Arlo is now finally allowed to leave his spot on the silo, his mark on the silo, and he like, you know, prints it in his spot. His mark goes in between his parents' marks, and it's a symbol as like your mark on the world is that, yes, you helped all of those people as well, but you also managed to make it back here after, you know, being washed away. And like your mark is the fact that you went through all of that journey to get back here to us, back to your family. And I really like how they show that, because that is a very good way of like showing that. Okay. Now we are going to do cast, because there's not really much else to talk about. There's cast. So we have Raymond, and I'm going to apologize, I'm going to mispronounce some of these people names. We have Raymond Ochoa as Arlo. We have Jack Bright as Spot. We have Sam Elliott as Butch, which is just fun. We have A.J. Buckley as Nash, so he was the brother. Nash was the brother. And then we have Anna Paquin as Ramsey as the sister. Anna Paquin, of course, been in so many different movies. She's Rogue in the original X-Men trilogy, and in X-Men Days of Futures Past, she plays Rogue wonderfully. We have Steve Zahn as Thunderclap, who's like the leader of like the Storm cult. We have Jeffrey Wright as Papa Henry. We have Frances McDormand as Mama Ida. We have Marcus Scribner as Buck. We have Malay Paladia, as Libby. We have Peter Sohn, who is the director of the movie, as Forrest Woodbush, who is the pet collector character. And then there's like the Velociraptor type characters. So yeah, it's not a huge voice cast, but it's still a pretty good one, I'd say. I do really like this movie. I would say, while I finish talking, I'll tilt the screen back so you can look at the dog, because he's so cute and fluffy. Aren't you cute and fluffy? Right? Yes, and I blend in with the blankets on the pillow. Yes, you do. And what happened, you know, it's like I do actually really enjoy this movie. I haven't actually watched it that many times, but I do really enjoy it because, A, the scenery in it is beautiful. The world they designed for it is gorgeous. And it's just, you know, dinosaurs having like human emotions is also something that I just really enjoy, like them having like human level intelligence type of thing that they show with that. And, you know, I just like the movie. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's like in my top 10 Pixar movies. Well, I don't know. At some point I will do a thing where I go through and like rank all the different Pixar movies, and then like rank like, I don't know if I can rank all the different Disney movies themselves, like in comparison to all of each other, but like maybe in different eras, maybe, but we'll see. So that's what we have here. Given when this is probably going to go up in comparison to like 4th of July and other stuff like that, because I have like family reunions and other things like that that I have to do during the beginning of July and a little bit later in July. The Pixar movie should still stay on track, but we'll see what's going on with that. So I thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you haven't watched The Good Dinosaur in a while, I would suggest going and watching it because it's a very good movie. And, you know, the dog is moving and he's going to lay back down. He's like, I am cute. I am the only reason people watch this channel. You know, dog, sometimes I think that's true. I wouldn't be surprised. So, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day. Bye. Sometimes you gotta get through your fear to see the beauty on the other side.